You need to support organizational security. We're talking threat model methodologies coming up next.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are continuing our series in CySa Plus, and we got a lot to talk about. So let's hit the gate running. Dan, where do we start?
Today we are going to start with threat modeling, and we're going to look at some methodologies that we use when we perform those threat models, or threat modeling as a thing. This is a verb, not a noun, right? But let's first start really quickly. Let's define threat modeling so we're all on the same page. Basically, this is the idea of trying to figure out the capabilities and, basically the capabilities of threats that would come against your organization, right? So who do I need to be on the lookout for? What are their abilities? And then I'm going to model that by kind of acting in that way, seeing what level of capabilities my current security posture will allow us to basically withstand, okay? So that's the idea of threat modeling. We want to find our breaking point, and we're going to continue to work our way through more and more advanced capabilities of the different threats and attacks that would come against our organization and see where we fall, see where we start to struggle, get on that struggle bus and sit on the back seat, if you know what I mean, right? So that's threat modeling. Now that takes us into the methodologies in which we need to be familiar with when it comes to the exam, but not only that, but these are really good methodologies that we're going to employ when we are performing threat modeling per se, okay? Let's start off with adversary capability. Adversary capability. And this simply means what are the capabilities, right? How easily could an adversary adapt, adjust, right? What are their means financially that they have available to them to be able to attack our network? What is their capability technically, infrastructure? What kind of things do they have access to? That's what we're talking about when we say adversary capability. And it's going to have this scale of different things that we could use to try to gauge that. And that's what it's all about, is trying to figure out, so this adversary's capabilities are this, and this, and therefore I will gauge them at a certain level of importance when it comes to me trying to model against them, okay? So that's where we're going when we mean adversary capabilities.
Now, Dan, you mentioned this term levels of capabilities. All right. Can you explain some of those levels and what they mean for us?
Yeah, fortunately for us, we don't have to try to reinvent the wheel all the time. That's a very good thing, right? There are great corporations out there and organizations that have done this heavy lifting stuff for us. And we see MITRE back to the rescue here. They actually have a scale for us to try to figure out what are the capabilities of my adversaries. Let's jump into the old computer here and see what that has to say. Here we go. This is from the, it says Homeland Security Systems Engineering and Development Institute, but you can see right there, MITRE.org is where I found this. So this is their characteristics of adversary capabilities, resources, methods, and attack vectors. They do give a good, probably a better definition than I did. Adversary capabilities can be characterized in terms of resources, expertise, financial resources, technical others, methods, and attack vectors, and representative values for 5 broad classes of adversary capabilities. This is something I would get familiar with. This is something I would spend some time with and be able to, I don't know, if maybe there was a survey that asked you questions, you would be able to answer something about them. Hint, hint, wink, wink. So let's see here. We have acquired and augmented. So acquired, basically, the adversary has very limited resources or expertise of their own. Augmented, the adversary has some expertise and limited resources of their own. So kind of almost on the same level. This is going to be your very basic. They're going to be using things like commodity malware and other hacking tools that are just easily obtained. And they're going to have maybe functional use of them. But even if you get into augmented, you have the ability to maybe tweak and peak it a little bit to make it perform in a way that normally it wouldn't do. You just got a little bit of skill, okay? Let's move on down. Developed. The adversary has the moderate degree, or has a moderate degree of resources and expertise. And of course, it goes into a little more detail over here on the right-hand side of these things. Basically, they can come up with their own O days, right? search out, do that exploit developments. They have access to significant human or financial resources to attack and plan that execution out. So this is definitely starting to get into a higher class of threat actor, right? And then, of course, we get into advanced. The adversary has a significant degree of resources and expertise. I like this. Adversary influences commercial products and services during design, development, manufacturing. We're talking supply chain type attacks here. Okay, that's what we want to associate with an advanced adversary capability. And then, last but not least, is the integrated. The adversary is sophisticated and very well resourced. The adversary generates their own opportunities to successfully execute. This is really getting into human resources, maybe even military-based resources. This is super high-level, state-sponsored kind of adversary that you want to definitely have on your radar, understand what they can do. If you've started to threat model this level of adversary, their capabilities are very high, and it's going to be very difficult for you to model that out because of their access. If you're at a large enough organization, though, maybe you have that juice. But if you're in a smaller shop, good news is you're probably not going to be attacked by that level, but you never know, right? Depending on what kind of connections you have, you could fall under their radar. So just be prepared for that. And now at least we understand those capabilities and how they are vetted.
You know, Dan, tell us a little bit about things like attack surface. Where does attack surface come in?
All right, so the attack surface. What is the attack surface? The attack surface is basically like all possible points of ingress into our environments, right? Our system at large. And you can't leave anything out when it comes to this. This is why we typically say total attack surface. This is everything, right? That's what I want to see. So with the total attack surface, this would be things like, well, just our normal web presence. Do we have a web application? Do we have a VPN that users access our internal resources from? Do we have Wi-Fi? Do we have network ports in our lobby of our building, right? Anything you can think of that would allow someone to ingress into the system in any way, authorized or un, you need to be, we're trying to figure out every possible point of entry into that system. That's what we mean when we start talking about the total attack surface. Now, our job as defenders is to reduce the attack surface down as much as possible, and where we can't reduce it, we defend it. We put up larger gates, guns, guards, that kind of stuff to keep it. That brings up another one, physical access as well, right? That is a way into your system. If I can walk into your building in some way, shape, or form, either through picking a lock or cloning a badge or social engineering or whatever, and I can gain access to the system physically, that's a bad day for you. We don't want that, right? So, but it is a point of entry. We need to think of that. Don't forget other services, FTP, SSH, Telnet, all those stuff, RDP, those fun things that make our lives a little bit easier. They can also be a point of entry. Software that we are running, that could be, if it's an internal, maybe you got an inside threat, that could be, again, total attack surface. So leave nothing out, everything and the kitchen sink. That's what we're talking about.
You know, I know, Dan, attackers usually have some kind of method to the madness, right?
Yeah.
There is usually some kind of way that they get in or they're doing something. Can you tell me, you know, our viewers out there, tell me about this term attack vector.
Oh, yeah. So the attack vector is going to be the specific means of exploitation at a point on the attack surface, right? So this is going to be there. This is how I found a way, right? It finds a way, as they say. That's what they're doing. So the attack vector is the specific area in which they were used, that the attacker could use to did use to exploit and gain access into the system. Right? So there are three different attack vector categories that we need to be aware of. One is cyber, right? This is anything IT, hardware or software, right? So cyber is one. Another one is the human attack vector. Think social engineering. If I can use guile and basically lies to elicit information or gain access to an area or a thing or information that I shouldn't, that's the human vector, right? And then, of course, we have the physical vector, which I was just having a good time talking about. I do like to pick locks. If you're not a lock picker, I highly recommend getting into it. It's a really cool way to demonstrate a security system and how it has flaws and how we can exploit those flaws. It's a really great illustrative tool, should I say? And it's a lot of fun. You're gonna get hooked once you pick that first lock and it pops open. Yeah, you're gonna be running around town looking for locks legally, right? But break-ins, right? That's what we're talking about when it comes to the physical attack vector. I get through the building, the physical mechanism. If there's a lock on it, a keypad, a biometric, or maybe like an RFID kind of thing, I'm going to get by it and get into it. So those are the three attack vectors we need to be aware of.
You know, Dan, one of the things I'm thinking about when it comes to this next term is, how does this, affect us, right? These different attacks that can happen, the attack vectors, something as simple as taking a large blanket on top of a data center and throwing it over their exhaust system
That
could
will
cripple
work.
their systems, right? So how does this affect us? Can you tell us a little bit more, maybe put some meat on the bone when it comes to impact?
Yeah, your mind is definitely going in the right flow because after we start modeling all these things, and part of that modeling process needs to be basically a risk analysis. All right, so if this happens by this person and their capabilities are X, Y, or Z, like how will that affect us if it happens? And this is the impact. Okay, so how will that impact our organization? So do that risk assessment. Couple of things we need to think about when we're doing that impact assessment as part of our risk assessment, which is how will it disrupt our business if a data breach occurs and that data gets out? That could definitely be an impact to the system. Maybe that's intellectual property, and now our competitors have access to that information and are able to beat us to the punch on creating the coziest hats for cats that can be made on the market. Man, we had real R&D. It put a lot of effort. Now it's out on the internet. It's on Pastebin. Bummer, right? That could impact the business. A couple others, fines and penalties that could be incurred due to the fact that something happened. That does occur. Think GDPR, think the California Privacy Act, that kind of stuff. There are penalties. Maybe it's other like specific regulatory penalties.
PCI DSS,
Nailed it.
HIPAA,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. If
definitely.
I allow health information to get out, I'm going to have to stand before the man
Sure.
and explain myself and probably go, sorry, right?
And
That-
people might not understand, how impactful that is to a business, because I don't suggest you reading GDPR if you don't have to, and it's not your line of work. But we're talking upwards of $1 million to $2 million per incident.
Yeah.
You got 100,000 users in your database, and it's been breached. Do the math. Lots of money. Just
Yeah,
tank a bit.
tons of money. That's right. Tons of money. And I want to point out, I'm glad you brought that up because it points out that typically this is in some form of monetary value, right? If you look at an impact scale, it's typically within X amount of dollars if you're in US or whatever currency that you're using. But it is monetary in value most of the time. Okay. The last one would be loss of reputation and customers, right? Because now we think you're not great at what you do, or you were not careful with my information. As a customer, I'm not coming back. I'm going to a competitor. They haven't been breached yet, right? But hey, at least not yet. I'll trust them because they haven't proven that they couldn't be trusted. Or even if that's not the case, it could be in the mind of your customer. If they think that, well, what are you going to do? You can try to HR it, but that, again, it's all comes back to the do-re-mi, that it's going to cost you a little bit of money to regain that reputation and regain those customers that you lost because of an attack that occurred.
And it takes time.
It does.
Right? I mean, you could spend all the money you want, but if you think about it, it might take you another 20 years to gain that reputation back once something happens. And let me just, maybe something that you can relate to. I like running, and no, people aren't chasing me. I'm doing it out of my own recognizance.
Yeah, you're a sick man, Leslie.
That's right.
Sicko.
But when I think of shoes, okay, and just puts branding in here, I think, wow, I really want me some Nikes. I don't even know what shoe they have on the wall, but I'm pretty sure I want that one because I know the brand. Now, if I consecutively started to get shoes that I didn't like, and I would say, oh, wait a second, I'm never getting Nike again, and it's not the case, but you can see that brand reputation might take a very long time to build up, regardless of the money behind it. Now, Dan, I know in risk we talk about chance. What is the chance something is going to happen? Can you tell us a little bit about this concept around likelihood?
Yes, definitely goes hand in hand with impact. A lot of time you'll see this in risk matrices. It'll be impact and likelihood will be the two vertices that you go against, right? And the likelihood is basically how likely is this to happen? What is the percentage or probability that this would occur to us? And there'll be a sliding scale. Now, the real question is, how do we calculate that, for lack of a better term? A couple ways in which we can do this is we can determine the attacker's motivations. So if they're highly motivated people, maybe you're in an industry that sees a lot of hacktivism. Could be. I was just listening to a Darknet Diaries and how this kid was very into animal rights, so he started DDoSing SeaWorld. He had watched Blackfish, and it really got him riled up, and he had already learned how to DDoS from doing gaming to kick people off of his games. And now he just turned that gun toward SeaWorld and DDoSed them. Really? His motivation was high. So they need to threat model that out and figure out what that is. And then there's the capabilities as well, right? We go right back to where we started. What is the capabilities of these potential attackers? And not only that, but how effective have they been in the past at performing that very action against others? Want to throw that in there. It's going to help us figure that out. And the last thing we need to do is determine the ARR, the annual rate of occurrence. How often do they engage in said activities? Once we figure that out, it's going to help. You put all that stuff together, you're going to get a really good idea of what the likelihood actually is that you would see an attack from that. And that's what it's all about, right? We're trying to model out, if I were this APT or this group or this attacker and I was motivated to come after me, how well would I do? That's what we're trying to figure out at the end of the day. So if you take all these different methodologies, you put them in together, you systematize it. Threat modeling probably be a show all its own, to be honest with you. It takes a lot of time and effort, but it's totally worth it, because at the end of the day, we're going to know with pretty good certainty, I won't say perfect certainty, but a decent amount of certainty of how well we would fare against advanced attackers or non-advanced attackers even, and be able to quantify that in some way with a risk assessment.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we talked a lot about, different concepts surrounding threat modeling methodologies. Remember, we've talked about threat modeling, adversary capabilities, total attack surface. We talked about attack vector, also the impact and the likelihood. And I will say, to increase your likelihood of passing that exam, be familiar with these concepts so you're going to do well. And speaking of the CySa Plus series, we got a lot more to come. Not in this episode. We hope to see you in upcoming episodes.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.